Every single cell and organ system in your body has a circadian clock in front of it. And so, if you really want to optimize your overall health, the timing of light and the timing of darkness is really crucial to your gut health, to your hormonal health, to even your skin health. There's so many things that are tied to the circadian rhythm.
When I'm short on time or out traveling, carnivore snacks are a tremendous time saver. They give me a delicious, zero cooking required meal without any weirdo ingredients. No matter what cut you choose, they're always just meat and salt. That's it. I know exactly what I'm getting, and I love them all. Use code TheCarnitarian for 15% off your order at carnivoresnacks.com. Hey, everybody. Today is going to be awesome. I have finally got my good friend, Sarah Kleiner, here. She's on the channel. I'm so excited for this episode. Sarah is board certified in applied quantum biology and has coaching certifications both in quantum biology and nutrition. She's got over 14 years of experience working one-on-one with clients to optimize their nutrition, their lifestyle, their mindset. She is not new to this health and wellness space. Sarah, welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I'm like, how long have we known each other and we haven't like had an actual conversation?
A
It's
long
been
time.
yeah.
I think that I met you like 6 or 7 years ago, honestly, on Instagram, through our mutual at the time carnivore experiences. And
Mhm.
we've just been able to stay friends through all the changes and all the different trends that have gone on and all the different belief systems that people talk about. We've been able to just be good people and stay
Yeah,
friends,
yeah.
not
That's
get
I
caught
was
up in it all.
before you hit record, I'm like, Linda and Kelly both, and probably Lisa too, Dr. Lisa, like, if I was to say tomorrow, like, I'm not even gonna eat meat anymore, which would, like, never happen, like, please, like, call 911 if that ever happens, but, like, if it did, you guys would probably be like, "That's cool, we can still be friends." Like, I don't hate you.
Yeah, I mean, good people. I mean, good people make bad decisions sometimes. They're still
Yeah,
good people. It's
exactly,
so funny. So, I mean, but
exactly.
this is something that I really like, I admire about you is that you have been so willing to like do something different, promote something that people were at first either dismissive of or skeptical of, and then take that criticism that comes along with that, and
Mhm,
then really be able to validate yourself. Like to say, no, this is not woo woo. This is
mhm.
not out of nowhere. And this is stuff that people really need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that you sent me was this really great goal of yours that to me it reads like a fantastic mission statement, and I'd love to just read it. That your
Yeah,
goal is to shift the paradigm when it comes to circadian rhythms, health, nutrition, and light, and help people integrate these principles into their lives in a modern world for optimal health, regardless of age or stage of life. I mean, what a mission. This is
yeah.
this is the good stuff. This is all encompassing, and this is where people need to really, like, put their focus.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot more empowering too because changing the food can be hard. I mean, let's just face it. It's hard, and when I was working with people on carnivore, the compliance was tough. It takes a lot of willpower to do it, not to saying it can't be done. I did it for 2 years straight, and I know a lot of people who've done it for years and years like yourself, but a lot of people it's like, "Oh my gosh, this is just like super hard." And so what I really love that I do now is I start with light because when you actually study light, it impacts the body on a cellular level. It impacts your appetite, it impacts your digestion, it impacts like pretty much every single function in the body. And so I find that a lot of people begin a lot of these routines I teach with light and understanding it, and the food isn't as hard. So if they do, and I do still recommend certain people do carnivore or a ketogenic approach due to specific health goals or conditions that they have. But when I can start them off and fix their light diet first, approaching the nutrition just becomes that much easier. It doesn't become such an uphill battle.
Mm. I
Yeah.
think that's great. Was it something in you, like, sort of made you veer off the carnivore path and learn that there are other things that are more important or maybe as important or that should be adjuncts to a good healthful diet? I mean, can you
All of
tell
the
us a little bit all of the above? Give us like an intro to what happened in your life? Like, where's the background there to say, I've got to focus on more than just carnivore and with
yeah.
myself and with my clients?
Okay. So at the end of the pandemic, I had really decided, like, okay, I'm ready to have another baby. Like, I had always wanted to have another baby, but I had struggled to have the bandwidth for it because my daughter has non-speaking autism. And so it had always been like, I want to do this, but it's just going to be too hard. I want to do it, but it's going to be too hard. But at the end of the pandemic, we had all been at home and really bonded as a family. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. And so I thought it was going to be like, I've been carnivore, strict carnivore for a couple of years. This is going to be really easy. This is great. I got pregnant right away, but then I lost that baby. And then my doctors were like, well, you're 41. So that's normal. You're going to be fine. You'll have the next one will work. And then I got pregnant again and lost that one. And then it was like, that's when I really, after that second one, is when I really started questioning my hormones, thyroid, all of that stuff, and really started doing more testing to look at those levels and found out a lot of them were not as optimized as I thought that they were. And then I started being like, all right, well, how can I optimize them? And I had already started on IVF. I had, of course, talked to Dr. Kiltz and, gotten his take on things. And he is such a kind person. Like, he talked to me on the phone like multiple times and was like really encouraging and really helpful. Of course, telling me to do more carnivore and carnivore harder. And something about it for me was just like, I feel like there's more to this. And so I had already started IVF, which, by the way, didn't work. We got nothing out of IVF except we cashed money out of retirement that we ended up, never seeing again. But at that time, I was given the opportunity to interview Dr. Jack Cruz, who I thought was just a nutball, like crazy. But I'm like, why not? Why not interview him? And I only talked to him the one time. So I didn't have like a long relationship with Cruz after the fact or anything like that. I just talked to him the one time. And after the interview, I told him what was going on with me. And he's like, you need to study leptin and you need to study light and you need to look at this more than you're micromanaging your food and your diet. You need to do this and consider looking at food through a little bit more of a seasonal approach, a seasonal lens. And I was like, you know what? What do I have to lose at this point? Because basically, what he's telling me to do is go outside in the morning, block blue light at night, and then consider some of these other factors of quantum biology, circadian biology, and how that plays into my health. And like, I've already done all the other stuff. I had already seen regular doctors. I had seen functional medicine doctors. I had started doing like genetic testing with functional medicine doctors and Dutch testing and all that stuff. And I was just like hemorrhaging money. Like, we cashed so much money out of the retirement plan trying to do this. And it was very emotional and frustrating. And so I started going beyond just nutrition and really understanding circadian biology and then quantum biology as well. So that's more the element of how our body is 99% water on a molecular basis and how that interplays with our health and our mitochondria, and applying those things. And that was, I think I interviewed him maybe in September of 2021 and really started implementing these things. And then that January, I was pregnant with my son, and then he was born that October 2022, and he'll be 2 next month, which is crazy.
Oh my gosh, time has flown. That's amazing. I mean, that's just fantastic. Congratulations on that. I mean, because that's something that a lot of women do struggle with, especially when they start to say things to you like advanced maternal age.
Yeah,
And then,
totally.
and it's like, can we not do better than that? Like if there's something that we can do to help ourselves to regain our fertility when you're so wanting to have a child, I mean, then you do it. So
Right,
that's incredible. Oh, I
right.
want to get into these things. I want to get into all of the different sort of key principles that you are now teaching others how to do. And I'm seeing a lot of good, like posts that you put of reviews of your courses where people are like, Sarah, you saved my life. Sarah, I got pregnant. Sarah, I've dropped this much weight. People are really getting so many tremendous benefits from what you have been teaching. And I have been influenced by you for sure in getting some of these principles worked into my day to day, which is different for me, which is amazing because I tend to be one of those people who's very set in their ways, and I'm very like, no, that's fine. I'm doing my thing, and it's fine. Leave me alone. But in the back of my head, I'm like, I think there's absolutely something to what Sarah is saying, and I've started implementing some stuff. So we're going to get into that. But what I would love to do with you first is the very first ever quantum edition speed round, which will be so much fun. And as I always say, you may or may not have already seen these questions, and they are choice questions. You can choose one, choose the other, choose both, or neither. But here we go. You ready for the speed round?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. First up is hot sauna or cold plunge?
Can we do both, but do the cold plunge after?
Absolutely. Is that what you do? You
Yeah.
sauna and then you cold plunge? Or do I have that
Always.
reversed?
Always end on cold. Yes.
Oh, fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating. I didn't know that. Oh my gosh. Okay. Second one. Salmon roe or salmon steak?
I mean, I like both, honestly, but if it's like I'm in a rush, then I'll go with the salmon roe.
Excellent. I love those like little magic balls. Yoga studio or weight room? Where are you at now?
Neither, honestly. I am like outdoors moving more naturally. I haven't done either.
Awesome. That's incredible. I remember I used to take your yoga classes and they were always great. I
Oh
recommend
yeah, I
those.
took the yoga on Zoom during the pandemic.
Yeah, those were fun. So
Yeah.
here's one that if anyone's been following you, I think they're going to know the answer to this one. Wi-Fi or in Ethernet?
Always Ethernet, always.
Always Ethernet.
Yeah.
And
Totally
we will
possible.
maybe we'll get into that one. Midday sun or red light panel?
Midday sun, definitely.
Midday sun. Okay. Thoughts on sunscreen. And of course, we're talking about non-toxic sunscreen, but sunscreen for body, face, both, neither.
I like
What do you
shade
do?
better. You can. Yeah. If you got it out,
Mm.
maybe zinc oxide, but I really prefer shade over sunscreen.
Over sunscreen. All right, great. As far as water goes, Topo Chico, Gerald Steiner, or filter at home and remineralize?
Either Gerald Steiner or filter at home and remineralize.
Oh, nice. Here's one. Camping, because you're an outdoorsy kind of a person, glamping, or the Ritz Carlton?
What can I choose the Four Seasons?
Four season. Absolutely. I'll go there with you. I don't camp or glamp.
I don't I don't really do either, honestly. I mean, it sounds awesome in theory, but if I have time away from my kids where I can just like chill and relax, like, yeah.
Good. All right, cool. This is a different format question. How do you feel about indoor grounding devices like grounding mats, grounding sheets? Yay on those or nay?
It depends on where you get them from. I would only buy from Intuition Physician. That's the only place I'd buy from. But yeah, I really overall don't like them unless someone has like mobility issues, they're recovering from a surgery. And then I'm going to have them get a dirty electricity filter from Dr. Carnivore, who's Intuition Physician. But outdoor is better. And you can ground
Mm.
sometimes a lot of places in your house, like when you're washing your hands, you're grounded. In the bathtub, you're grounded. If you're in the basement on a cement floor, a lot of times you're grounded. So there's a lot of ways you can ground without buying the tools.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, last question. Extended fasting, intermittent fasting, or please God, just stop with the fasting.
I mean, I still intermittent fast. I definitely do, but it's always dinner skipping and never breakfast skipping.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much for participating in the speed round. I appreciate your honesty and answers. I think people will get something out of that. So now getting back to the serious stuff, I would love to first start to talk with you about circadian rhythms and internal clocks, the timing of light and the timing of meals, different wavelengths of light, all of these things that require proper timing. Can you discuss this with us? Like, what are the things that we need to be paying attention to and why?
Well, what's really important that most people don't understand that I didn't understand is that every single cell and organ system in your body has a circadian clock in front of it. And so if you really want to optimize your overall health, the timing of light and the timing of darkness is really crucial to your gut health, to your hormonal health, to even your skin health. There's so many things that are tied to the circadian rhythm. And the morning is very, very important for light exposure because it's going to basically turn on your HPA and HPG axes, and it's going to get your body revved up, ready for the day, and also start the production of the sex steroid hormones and thyroid hormone as well. So you really want to optimize morning sunlight as much as you possibly can if you want to optimize your metabolism, your hormone, all of your mood. All of those things really are heavily signaled by light.
And then what about the timing of food?
Yeah, so food is a secondary circadian signal. And so a lot of people have a poor circadian rhythm to begin with, and a lot of people have really stressful lives. So in the morning, what happens is that our mitochondria begin the production of pregnenolone, and that pregnenolone is funneled to two places, the cortisol pathway and also our sex steroid hormone pathway. And so if our body gets into a really stressed out state, and and it's like send it down the cortisol pathway, that's going to take away from sex steroid hormone production, right? So this
Mhm.
is why it really recommend people eat something to stabilize the blood sugar. A good carnivore meal is really best, honestly, in my opinion, with adequate protein and fat. But that's going to give the body, number one, another circadian signal. So food and temperature are Zeitgebers. They're secondary timekeepers behind light. So it's going to reinforce the circadian rhythm. It's also going to stabilize your blood sugar and stop that pregnenolone from going down the cortisol pathway because your adrenals are all of a sudden like, we have to work harder. We have to work harder. Cortisol is really high because cortisol is already really high in the morning. It's supposed to rise naturally in the morning. So eating the breakfast and getting appropriate light signals is going to kind of put the brakes on cortisol and allow pregnenolone to be funneled into the sex steroid hormone pathway as well. So it's important for blood sugar balance, for mood, for energy, reinforcing circadian rhythm, all of the above. So that was a big shift for me coming from carnivore, because a lot of carnivores will wake up, have the coffee, and not have their first meal until like mid-morning, later in the day. That's what I did on carnivore. And so the shift for me was like, oh, I got to start eating breakfast now, which is hard. So I started with light and I started with something really small. And then over time, I started pushing my dinner back a little bit more and more, and I'd wake up with a good appetite. So it took some time to shift that, but that's really the importance of it. And there's some really interesting scientific studies I've put in my newsletter lately. One of them basically showed perimenopausal women that had a big breakfast and a small dinner. And then the perimenopausal women, the same age, they had the same amount of quote unquote calories, energy, same amount of food, but they had a very small breakfast and a very big dinner. And they both lost weight because they were both in a deficit. But the women in perimenopause who ate the big breakfast and the small dinner lost significantly more weight, had lower triglycerides, decreased waist circumference, like lower fasting insulin, several metabolic markers were superior to the women who had the bigger dinner and the smaller breakfast. And so,
Mhm.
in perimenopause, like that's a kind of hormonally sensitive time for a woman. Um, and it can be a little more tricky to engineer things like weight loss and, decreasing waist circumference. So that's a really valuable study. And there was another study where the perimenopausal women were given a breakfast that was protein and fat, like at least 30 grams of protein and fat, or just pure carbs. And of course, you see the blood glucose throughout the day in the women who had the protein and fat being stable, better insulin levels throughout the day, better energy, better mood. All of those markers were vastly, vastly superior to the women who just had the heavy carb breakfast. So there's a lot of interesting scientific studies. There's also studies that show women that skip breakfast have higher cortisol and elevated blood pressure over time. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it. And people think like, oh, she's against fasting. No, I still will like skip dinner and do fasting that way. Not every single day because you don't want to stress your body out, but I will still do that to practice intermittent fasting because I do think that there are benefits to it. So yeah, I know that was a lot that I just
Yeah, no,
said.
that's okay. So, like, for people who want to get started with this, you mentioned, like, if you're so used to not having breakfast and you wake up in the morning and you think, well, all I can have is a cup of coffee. I will make myself like a protein coffee typically before I go out to like a training session, because I
Mhm.
feel like when I eat a meal, anything solid, it messes with my ability to
Mhm.
focus. And I'm very interested in figuring out how I can do both, how I can get a solid meal in, like a real meal. And I'm putting protein in my coffee, but I'm really feeling like I need to intentionally start shifting towards more of a meal, but then have
Mhm.
that not be a distraction for me. Like at this point, I feel like I've got this excuse of why I'm not doing the recommendation. How, will that, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but ultimately, do people find that that first meal does not distract them? Some people say,
Mhm.
if I feel so focused with the morning fasting, I don't want to give up that focus. Is there ultimately like a shift that will happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we wake up, cortisol is naturally supposed to rise. And what that is for people that feel like that intense focus, it can be that your cortisol is a little bit too high, right? And then you might also see downregulation of some sex hormones, which happens a little bit in perimenopause, but there can be extreme versions of this. And so there's a little shift, there is a little adjustment period that takes place. But I find that people, once they make that shift, they have more clean, sustained energy throughout the day. So it's a little bit of a cleaner energy than just like because I would do that too, wake up, have the coffee, or put like some protein in my coffee and go on with my day. You'll find that you again have like a cleaner energy throughout the day when you do that. And what I recommend to people who like to get up and do some sort of workout or do something, start with like two hard boiled eggs and have like 15 grams of protein or so. You may have to have three hard boiled eggs for that, but start with like something smaller, and then you'll find over time the appetite will shift. But just that little bit of a signal, if you're going to go work out or you're going to go be active, a lot of times that's going to be enough to help. And then you could have a second breakfast when you're done with the workout or the training that's a little bit more substantial. I don't have a problem with people doing that, but it's all about kind of like making a small shift to get the process going, because it will take a little bit of a time, especially if you've been doing the coffee for breakfast for years and years. It's a shift. It definitely is.
And then shifting as far as the last meal of the day,
Mhm.
do you recommend a cutoff time? Is it like sundown, an hour after sundown? What are your recommendations for people there if they want to start doing that?
I try to definitely do sundown. In the winter, it can be a little more challenging. Like, I know you're like a few hours north of me. I'm in the 33rd latitude. And so in the winter, really like the latest that the sun goes down here is like 5:30, or the earliest, I mean, is 5:30 PM.
Mm.
So that's not super hard to do once you become fat adapted, once you really got your morning routine down and that, solid breakfast. It kind of shifts and happens naturally in the winter more so. But for people who are just getting started, maybe they're not fat adapted, maybe they haven't got the morning routine and the evening routine kind of sorted yet, I would try to make it a rule to eat at least 3 hours away from bedtime. And then you work on creating an evening routine where you're getting to bed, where you're pushing the eating window back. You're still working on the morning routine, getting appropriate light signaling, and you shift. Like, I think everyone thinks you have to go from 0 to 100 when you make a change with your health, be it this or be it exercise or whatever you're trying to do. Everyone wants to do the rip the band aid off approach. And I'm definitely guilty of that myself. But if you can just make gradual shifts, so start with 3 hours away from bed and start getting more used to that. And then as winter comes and there's less light, your body makes less cortisol in the winter because light is a cortisol. Well, if you're not blasting your body with a bunch of artificial light after dark, you're going to hopefully make less cortisol. That will help also because your gut starts, the motility starts slowing down. You start making less stomach acid as the sun goes down, as the day winds down. That's a natural part of circadian biology, also.
I see. Yeah, I do recommend that people basically have the last bite at least 2 hours before they go to bed, and probably that recommendation should be even more because it does give you better sleep to not be doing the digesting thing at night. You're supposed to be doing other things at night. Like, what is going on? What are the processes that we're really supposed to be doing? There's like brainwashing that's going on. And can you explain to us like where the focus, what's happening when we sleep and why sleep is so important to keep it in the sleep section, not in the digesting section?
Yeah, well, If your body's busy digesting food, it's really difficult to drop your body temperature. That's the first thing people are going to notice. Like if they wear an Aura ring that basically tells them, hey, your body temperature was elevated last night. I would always notice that, especially doing carnivore, because it is a lot to digest meat, a big ribeye before bed. Your body has to do a lot of work to digest that. And so they'll notice their body temperature on their Aura ring the next morning is like, oh, you didn't get a lot of deep sleep because your body temperature was elevated and it took it a lot longer to drop last night. And so that's one thing, because you want your body temperature to drop because a lot of healing can happen in cold and cooler temperatures. And that's how we work on a cellular level. And then in the early part of the night, we also are making human growth hormone, which is really, really important. And then we want leptin, which is this master circadian signaling hormone, to dock to the brain while we're sleeping as well. And that's going to give a report that's going to say, you have this amount of stored energy on the body. So tomorrow, do this with your thyroid, do this with your metabolism, do this with your appetite. And this docking process can't happen if your body is busy digesting food, if your dopamine's too high, if you're not making enough melatonin. Like several things can disrupt this energy information download, but definitely eating too late at night can create an issue for leptin to dock to the brain to give that report.
Leptin is something I hear you talk about quite frequently. And when people, at least in the carnivore space, people are focused so heavily on insulin, keeping
Mhm.
insulin levels down and saying that, all will be well if you just have low insulin. It's the key to fantastic health. But your focus is more on leptin. Can you help us understand? Like now I'm hearing you say things like this docking of leptin and how important it is. What are the other things that leptin does, and why should we be focusing on that maybe more than insulin?
Well, leptin actually signals the glucose insulin axis. And so people become leptin resistant before they actually become insulin resistant. So that's really important for people to understand. Like you might not be insulin resistant, but you could be leptin resistant. Typically, you become leptin resistant before you become insulin resistant. And leptin is a hormone. It wasn't really discovered until 1994, and so we're still learning a ton about it. But it's heavily indicated in reproductive issues. Like I said, it's a master circadian signaling hormone, so it is giving instructions to your thyroid. So there's typically leptin and thyroid have a loop. There's typically a leptin issue when there's a thyroid issue. Leptin and the immune system have a pretty intricate relationship. And so you'll find people with autoimmune conditions also have leptin issues. And vice versa. And it's just like I said, it's a master circadian signaling hormone. There's even leptin signaling that it improves bone density as well, or decreases bone density. So we have leptin receptors on the heart, in our reproductive organs. It's really influences the entire body. So being insulin sensitive is absolutely important. But like I said, leptin resistance happens before insulin resistant. And I had leptin resistance when I was doing carnivore because I was overdoing the fasting. I had a lot of blue light toxicity. I didn't understand about blue light, and that was interfering with leptin docking to my brain at night. Over fasting, and then just kind of staying in this like fasted, um, low insulin state all the time created low leptin, which can be an issue. I don't think it's as bad of an issue as elevated leptin, but it's still problematic for your reproductive hormones, your thyroid, and these other systems of your body. It really is.
Is how do people test for leptin, and is it a matter of either in most cases or not, that there is low leptin or just leptin resistance? So how would you know if you say you take a leptin blood test? How do
Mhm.
you know if that level of leptin is too low or if it's just that you're not sensitive? Like what is kind of testing can people do to find out what they need help with?
Yeah, so low leptin, typically for women, I like women to be between a 7 and a 10. And I know and this is not medical advice, but this is a pretty tight range that I see women when they get into that range. a lot of things kind of work themselves out, like weight, hormones, appetite, sleep, energy, all of that stuff. So that's kind of a tight range. So if you're below that range, like when I was carnivore, my leptin was a 4, and it was too low. I had all the symptoms of low leptin also. Then you're leptin resistant. But if you're above the 10, then you're also leptin resistant. So the signaling's not happening either way. The signaling is off either way, and it's
Mhm.
problematic either way. For men, the leptin is a bit lower. The range usually is between a 0 and a 4. I've seen men with like a negative 1.5 leptin before. I've seen men with really low leptin as well. So it's the same. Like there's just a signaling issue, and the body doesn't have the brain doesn't have communication with the stored energy on the body to know what's actually there. So it's like running a business and not really knowing what's in your warehouse ever. You
Mm.
can imagine the chaos that would cause.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I do, and especially now recently, there was a paper that, has come out, it's named Trapped Fat, and it talks about fuel partitioning, and it's a fantastic paper if you haven't read it. And it is about basically when we take in energy, for some people, the energy basically just gets sequestered and the body doesn't realize that it's there. And it does, your body says, we don't have enough fuel on board. We need to eat some more, get more fuel on board. And that leads people to overeating, is one of the aspects of the paper. And I would imagine that leptin plays a huge role in that kind of fat sequestration.
Absolutely.
And when you fix this through light, through restricting blue light after sundown, getting in morning sunrise, getting your meal timing right, are you essentially fixing the sensitivity or are you increasing the production of leptin or both?
You're fixing the sensitivity. And if there's too much leptin, then when you lose weight, then the leptin levels will come down because it's stored in the white adipose tissue. And so, primarily. So when you lose weight, your leptin levels will come down. When you improve leptin sensitivity, your leptin levels will come down. If you have low leptin and you're doing the things to improve the sensitivity, your levels will go up. When I got pregnant, I think my leptin was at a 7. And so that, well, and a lot of my hormones came back online. I had really low progesterone, really low testosterone, and those all came back into a good range to support a healthy pregnancy.
It's incredible to me. I mean, it's amazing. I have gone down the um, hormone replacement, path, and I've gotten my testosterone levels up and my progesterone levels up, and I just now have to wonder, like, could I have otherwise just focused on light and circadian biology and gone down this other path? And I'm not quite sure how to, like, reconcile this now in my head, but it's definitely like food for thought for me because I often do recommend, get your levels checked and see where you are. And you may want to consider hormone replacement. But obviously, if there is some other better natural way to increase your sex hormone production, get your leptin signaling correct, like that would be preferred for sure.
Oh,
I mean, just cost wise. My gosh.
cost-wise, and then I've seen people do hormone replacement therapy, and it create a cortisol issue or create other issues in the body. I'm definitely not someone who's like, I'm drawing a hard line and saying I'm against it, because I do have some clients that they've done everything with me. They've kind of been with me since day one, and they've optimized and they've done all the things. And then they add in a little bit of testosterone or a little bit of estrogen or progesterone, and they're like, oh my God, wow, I feel so much better. So I have seen it go both ways. I've seen the people who really optimize the basics, the things I talk about, their light, their nutrition. You've got to have, because protein is crucial for leptin signaling. That's why you're never going to see me say I don't eat meat anymore, because it's not an option. But I have people that do those things, and they're like, okay, now I'm ready to explore this avenue. I'm in my late 40s, and these shifts are happening, and they have tremendous results and they feel great. So I definitely don't want anyone to think like, oh, she's against it. And but I have also the opposite of people who haven't optimized the basics. Their cortisol is very imbalanced to begin with. And then they add in HRT, and it creates even more of a cortisol issue for
Mm.
them, which creates other downstream issues and immune system issues and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, it's something to to think about. And either way, doing the basics is going to be helpful for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
one thing I want to talk about is you've got this app now to help people sort of work on their circadian rhythms, their circadian biology. Tell us the name of the app.
Yeah, it's called the My Circadian app, all one word. And I have a website for it and an Instagram page and a YouTube channel where I'm creating educational videos about light. And yeah, it's essentially going to tell you what time daybreak, sunrise, UVA, UVB, sunset, and nightfall, what time that happens. It'll have a little timer so you can gauge your time in the sun. You're going to put in your Fitzpatrick skin type, your height, weight, age, all of those metrics, and then your latitude so it can estimate the UV index. And it'll tell you, you can go out in the sun for 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the middle of the day to synthesize vitamin D. And that's going to be probably enough for your skin type to avoid overexposure. Now, it's nothing in there is like medical advice, but yeah. And then there's a moon tracker app because I have my women in perimenopause and menopause who have irregular cycles. And so I have a little technique to show them, like, if we're going to push stressors, let's push it more towards this moon phase. So I have that for them. I have a compass because when you go outside for sunrise, you want to face east. That's the direction sun comes up. And then sunset is west. And a lot of people don't know north, south, east. They're like, where am I? You do learn that. It does become intuitive after you practice this stuff for a while. But yeah, I've kind of put all of these things into one app and onto one dashboard. So it's really simple for people to figure out. And there's a lux meter also, because lux, which is essentially the brightness, is really important for brain health, metabolism, mood. You've probably heard of a 10,000 lux light box. And those were born out of the brain's need for a certain amount of brightness in order to have optimal mental health, metabolism, mood, all of that stuff. So there's a lux meter, so it'll keep you honest, because indoors usually the maximum lux is around 500. For metabolism and brain health, we need about 2,500 minimum. And even on a rainy, cloudy day, a lot of times we can get up to 10,000 lux by just going outside. So that meter is kind of going to motivate people to get outside, open a window, do what you need to do to get that appropriate amount of brightness to support your body in those ways.
It's incredible. I think it's like an amazing app. I've sort of like peeked in at your previews of it, and I think it's great. I have done this lux experiment. Like you say, opening a window changes the lux so much
Mm-hmm.
more than I think we realize, because you're
Mm-hmm.
looking out the window, you see that it's bright outside, you open that glass, you still see the same amount of brightness typically, unless your windows are tinted. But that lux really changes. Like there's a huge difference. There's a huge jump just from opening the window. So I've started doing that too.
And then also our
Um,
windows and glass, they block infrared, red, and they block UV light, which are all really important for brain and metabolism as well. So if you want to talk about improving insulin sensitivity and glucose tolerance, red light has been shown to decrease glucose spikes and increase insulin sensitivity. And that's available when you go outside. You don't even have to get a red light therapy panel. You can just get that outdoors all day long from sunrise to sunset. So when you have your window closed, you're blocking out red and infrared and UV, and those are also needed for metabolic and mitochondrial functions of the body as well.
It's incredible to me because the recommendation so often is to stay inside, stay out of the sun. The sun is going to give you cancer, and you should stay in the shade as much as possible. And it sounds to me more like that everything our body needs is, I feel like I'm going to sound very much like you, is a signal coming from the sun. Like we
Mhm.
need to interact with the sun, with whatever wavelength length is happening at that time of day. It's the appropriate wavelength for us.
Mhm.
And so if we
Mhm.
just would stay away from artificial light and stay away from staying inside constantly, we would be a lot better off. And the advice is
Yeah.
so bad, right?
Yeah, it is. And you can get benefits of infrared in the shade. So, infrared, which is really, really crucial for mitochondrial metabolism, and, you know, any disease state mostly is going to stem from mitochondria that have become dysfunctional. So, we need infrared for mitochondrial metabolism. You get that in the shade when the sun bounces off green trees, plants, and you're also going to get circadian signaling in the shade. So, Yeah, I'm like a fair-skinned person, and I don't spend hours and hours a day in the sun. I use my little sun exposure timer to know, like, 15 minutes one side, 15 minutes the other side, I'm done. Or 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, I'm done. I don't have to go out for hours, and people can overdo sun exposure. They absolutely can. And your sun exposure should start in the morning when you're outside for sunrise with red and infrared, which are really rich. These help to precondition the skin. And light coming into the eyes helps to precondition the skin. It tells the body to make urocanic acid and melanin, which is going to protect you from the stronger rays of the sun. And so there's a whole system built in to give us a natural sunscreen. And then, of course, we want to like use common sense. We don't overdo it. You don't need to spend 6 hours a day in the sun. You can get a lot of benefits in the shade. You can get those mitochondrial benefits from again the rays of the sun bouncing off the green grass, trees, living plants, and you still get infrared, which is really helpful to your overall health, and it helps to increase cellular water. So many benefits.
It's incredible. It really just doesn't take that much time. I think sometimes, yeah, people think of it like an all or nothing thing. You're either out laying for 6 hours, like you say, or you're indoors or you're slathered up with sunscreen. And there is an in between that's sort of healthy for people.
Right.
Yeah, that's it's fantastic. You had talked a little bit about seasonality, and I want to talk about that as in terms of like macro. I hear that, yeah, protein is essential and this is what we need. Obviously, ketogenic diet is very good. We need fats, we need proteins. How do you feel about the seasonality of eating carbohydrates, and like where do you stand about adding carbohydrates into your diet now, and do you do more in summer, less in the winter, vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. It depends on your level of leptin sensitivity. So if somebody is like 50 pounds overweight, I'm not going to have them cycle in carbs. Like we want to teach you how to become metabolically flexible and healthy so that you can tap into your body's own stored energy. So I'm not going to have them do, but if they're not already doing carbs, I'm not going to have them start necessarily. And it's all like case by case, but I do some carb cycling in the winter. I'll rely more on like cellar stable root vegetables, low sugar, fruits if I do any fruits at all. And in the summer, yeah, there's more UV light, and UV light is what grows our food. And the UV index being over a 5 or a 6, my body is going to respond differently to carbohydrates in strong UV light than it will in a low UV light environment, like in the wintertime. So light really does signal the mitochondria, and it signals your body, and it like I said about red light, it can improve insulin sensitivity and glucose tolerance. And so if you're indoors and you're eating a banana in December, your body's like, what the hell are you doing? Why would you do that? That's like a ton of sugar. Your mitochondria is not going to handle it as well. It's high in deuterium, which is a mitochondrial toxin. If it accumulates, if there's too much of it, which will slow down your mitochondrial function, increase aging, and other metabolic diseases. And so, it's multi-layered, it's multifaceted. But as a general rule, people, once they become more leptin sensitive, metabolically healthy, can tolerate more carbohydrates in the summer. And you want to stick to local and seasonal as much as humanly possible. You want to eat them outside in the middle of the day. And then in the winter, less. Winter's a time for scarcity, more fasting. But I still do carb. Like I've gotten pretty lean now. So I will do like a couple days a week where I'll have a little bit of carbs, but it's a cellar stable root vegetable, something that doesn't just, it's not like a high sugar, grows out in high UV type of a food, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You mentioned eating it outside. What happens there? Like, what is the difference between eating a meal outside versus eating a meal inside? And is it only for carbohydrates that it matters? Like, what about all of us carnivores? Does it matter if we're
Mhm.
eating our meals outside or inside?
Well, blue light and non-native EMF both actually raise insulin and blood glucose and cortisol in the absence of food. And so think about that, eating a meal in front of your TV or eating a meal in front of like a big like light source in your house. That's a lot of blue light. And so you're already stressing out your body, and your insulin levels, your blood sugar levels, cortisol are going to be higher in the presence of blue light. And that's very well documented in the literature versus going outside in natural light where we've got the red and infrared, which is going to improve mitochondrial function and improve your glucose and insulin levels as well. And so even if you're a pure carnivore, you still want to have healthy insulin and glucose tolerance, even if you're just eating meat. So it's always going to be a beneficial thing, I think, to eat outside. And you're going to make more mitochondrial water as well when you're outside versus inside. That can actually dehydrate you on a cellular level. So your metabolic function, your leptin sensitivity, your overall health, really, even histamine intolerance, these things are all going to be impacted by your cellular water. And light, sunlight in particular, is really important for cellular water. So, yeah, anybody that's eating anything, I think, should go outside if they can. I know it's winter coming up, so that it's a little more difficult. But in wintertime, I'll like open my window and maybe have a red light panel going or a little heater, so I'm still getting benefits of outdoors being indoors.
It's just great. There's so much to think about. Like you're now mentioning this cellular water, and I think people would love to know the difference. I would love to understand really like when you're talking about hydration, you're not just talking about drinking the water or drinking the water with electrolytes. You're talking about hydration of each individual cell. Can you sort of elaborate more on that and tell people like what the difference is in hydration?
Yeah, so your body is 99% water molecule by volume. Everyone's like 70% water. And that changes because when you're a baby, when you're born, you're more like, I don't know, 90% water. And then when you're old, before you die, like you're more like 50% water. Like we lose that volume as we age, right? So dehydration and aging are intricately linked. But your mitochondria, which we've got all over the body inside of the cells, they actually make water. So everyone talks about mitochondria making ATP, but we actually make water at step 4 of the electron transport chain. And things that can block our body's ability to we make deuterium depleted water at step 4. Blue light, because when blue light hits the eye, like unfiltered blue light that's not balanced with red and infrared, it actually creates a form of retinol, which is a harmful form of vitamin A that can stop water production at step 4 of the mitochondria. Non-native EMF, same thing. And so we make this deuterium depleted water at step 4, and then we have exclusion zone water, which surrounds the cells in our body. That 99% water by molecule is this exclusion zone water. It's also on the inner and outer mitochondrial membrane. It surrounds those respiratory proteins. So it's essential for moving electrons across the electron transport chain. So essentially, it's really important for mitochondrial health, anti-aging, longevity, and staying hydrated to maintain a certain amount of exclusion zone water in the body and in the cells. And your cells also rely on having a negative charge to maintain health. When a cell loses negative charge, it begins to die. And that's where we get tissue stiffness, hardness, cancer, all of those. So I have a different way of looking at health and disease through the eyes of cellular hydration and maintaining that. So I'm always trying to teach people to really tend to their water, um, and understand infrared can expand that exclusion zone water up to fourfold. So just by going outside, and UV light striking the skin excites the electrons and builds more of them. So just going outside, you're increasing your cellular hydration. Grounding, touching the earth, is also going to pull more electrons into the body. And then blue light and is going to block water production and slow that down. And then non-native EMF is huge because Dr. Gerald Pollack, who is the father of exclusion zone water, I would recommend people look into his books and all of his work. He does amazing stuff. He has shown in a lab that exposing exclusion zone water to Wi-Fi pulls the production down. It decreases it by 15 to 20% or more. And so think about what we're doing indoors with all of these smart devices, Apple Watches, AirPods, things we're putting our phones on our bodies. We are decreasing our cellular water incredibly. And that's impacting the metabolism. That's impacting hormone signaling. That's impacting histamine because uh, dehydration triggers the histamine cascade. And a lot of people don't know that. So many things that are going awry in the body have a link to this cellular water and the lack thereof.
It's incredible to me because it sounds like, when you say things like this is what we need to focus on, this one thing, and this one thing will fix so many other things. People think like you're full of it. People are like,
Yeah,
no, it can't be just that easy. It can't be, and everything has to be specialized, and everything sort of works separately and disparately, and each system is not connected. And you're talking about several different systems. How can they all be affected by Wi-Fi or by blue light? But they are,
mhm,
and it's
yeah,
absolutely fascinating to me that we've normalized this sort of like indoor life. And I absolutely have fallen into it where I do spend a lot of my time indoors and I need to be spending more time outdoors. This kind of dehydration is not something that people can necessarily fix with
right.
electrolytes. It's not
Mhm,
like you can just put a packet in your water. And I would like
mhm,
to talk to you a little bit about water in general. Like, what can we do? I know you're not a fan of just drinking tap water. I'm also not a fan of tap water.
mhm.
What can people do to start getting better quality water if they're not going out and buying bottled water? What can they do in their own homes?
Yeah, so I'll send you a link. Remind me to send you a link to my hydration guide because it'll give videos where you can study all this stuff deeper, all the different things I like, the products I like, things like that. But essentially, I like people to filter their water. So that's really important. So either reverse osmosis or distilled is a good place to start. And then you want to add minerals back in because you don't want to drink reverse osmosis or distilled water plain because that can actually pull wash minerals out of your body as well. We need minerals to run the energetic functions of the body and the mitochondria. They're crucial. And the minerals are actually what help to get the water into the cell. So you can just drink dead water all day long and actually create more issues in your body. Your body needs minerals to run its functions. And
Mhm.
so I will add Quinton, Quinton. I love their hypertonic solution. I add that in. Dr. Carolyn Dean, she was on my show. She has a really great magnesium called Remag, and I'll do drops of magnesium in everybody's water. You can also make your own Soleil water if Quinton is like just way out of budget, using like a Redmond sea salt and put a spoonful of that in there. And then we'll do a little bit of potassium drops also, not a ton. You got to be careful with potassium. You want to try to get more of your food sources from with potassium, but if you're carnivore, it's a little harder to do that. And so I like Dr. Dean's potassium drops also. But as a basic, I would do some sort of a Soleil water, a hypertonic solution. And then if you want to play around adding in other things, you can. But that's a basic of what I do. And then if you want to structure your water, that can be helpful as well for mitochondrial health. There's a lot of really interesting research on structured water and anti-aging. And then hydrogen's a whole other rabbit hole that I've been down over the last year. That's another thing you can add. Hydrogen is a selective antioxidant. And so it can really also help to improve mitochondrial health and increase your cellular water as well.
These are 2 things that, like, are so over my head, it just blows me away. The structured water and the hydrogen water, because to me, water is water. I get that you
Mhm.
can have dissolved gas in water and you've got the bubbly water, but I'm not understanding the structuring of the water and like, how you can add hydrogen to water. When you add the hydrogen, is that just a dissolved gas the same way you would add, like, bubbles in a
Yeah,
carbonated
essentially,
drink?
it's gas that you're adding into your water, essentially, yeah, but it's very, very, very small, and it can get into the mitochondria, and there are, I think, over 2,000 studies on molecular hydrogen being used therapeutically, medically now, because it's pretty astounding. It's pretty interesting stuff, what they're able to do with hydrogen and some of the health conditions that they're treating now with it. And you can breathe it in as a gas as well. We do hydrogen inhalation, and I'm obsessed. I love it. Or you can drink it as well. There's different benefits to both. So, yeah, it's an interesting rabbit hole. I have a hydration mastery course it goes into all this a lot deeper. It gives you some studies, some research, shows you how to test because there's a lot of products out there now that will say they structure your water or they say that they add hydrogen to your water, and it's just a waste of money. Not a good idea. So in my hydration mastery course, I go into that and how to test and how to know that it's actually structured, how to know it's actually got hydrogen in it. Because yeah, I don't really like the little hydrogen bottles that you can buy because those can leach heavy metals into the water and they break and they don't even make therapeutic hydrogen after a time. It's a whole world that you can study.
There's so much I've seen these beautiful, like, goblets where that they like, swirl the water and
Oh,
supposedly
yeah,
create structured water. Is that a thing?
yeah, oh yeah, I don't have anything like that. I just have an Analemma water wand, and then Dr. Masaru Emoto did the most work on this, and Veda Austin has continued his work and taken it to another level where she's allowing like citizens all over the world to pretty much replicate her work easily. But they really show how we've got, our biofield and our heart. We talk about non-native EMF, but we also have EMF that we emit from our heart. And so they have some really, really cool research to show how just intention and prayer and these sorts of things can bring coherence to your water and structure the water as well. So the water tools like for structuring are really fun and there's some really cool ones out there. But you can do a lot with intention as well, and sunlight and moonlight too.
This absolutely fascinates me. Like, I'll travel into this rabbit hole a little bit on Instagram, and I see people, like, talking to the water or putting the water
Hmm.
in the sun, and I'm like,
Hmm.
"Really? Does it do something?" It's
It
fascinating
does.
to me. I mean, I
Yeah,
feel like
Veda
this is a
technique is like the coolest thing. I think you can get that off her website for like $30. But you use the petri dish technique to freeze water because I was like, I don't know if I believe this, but we we've done all that. Like my whole kitchen is like a water lab at this point. Like I'm super obsessed with water and playing with it and seeing what it does and testing it. But you can use her freezing technique. All you need is a petri dish, an iPhone, or a camera phone essentially, and an empty shelf on your freezer and water, and you can do little experiments with water. I think you do have to. I know it sounds very woo woo, but I do think you have to cultivate a relationship with water to an extent for it to really work. But yeah, it's pretty cool stuff that you can see when you do the freezing technique.
just incredible to me. This is, like, another conversation for another time, but I feel like there's just all of this, like, skepticism that I
Mhm.
have been able to, like, release more recently because I'm feeling like everything that we've been told over the years is not necessarily true. And
Agree.
I really completely believe that the experts know pretty much nothing. What they know is just a tiny little segment of what is actually out there for us to learn. And so I appreciate your willingness to share this kind of stuff, and your willingness to take the criticism of people saying, like, Sarah, this is so woo woo, because it must be kind of hard to say, no, this is really real stuff. But when you see your clients and friends doing better, implementing these techniques, like, you can't refute that. You can't say there's nothing to this. It's just incredible. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks so much for taking the time. I'm so glad we got
Yeah,
to chat.
me too. Thanks for having me. It was lots of
It's
fun.
great. Can you tell everybody, like, where they can find you, your socials, and where they can sign up for your courses?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram is at Sarah Kleiner Wellness. And then I've got a website, www.sarahkleinerwellness.com. Both of those will have links to get my courses, but I also have I think it's like 13 free ebooks because I love to put out free information as well because I know people are skeptical and they want to. You're like, okay, this is interesting, but let me start with something free before I make an investment to learn this on a deeper level. So I have a ton of free guides, resources. I've got a YouTube channel, a podcast where I dive into these topics as well for free, a free newsletter. I write articles weekly with lots of scientific articles, research, references for the skeptical people because I know that that's what's out there. And yeah, that's it's a lot of fun. People who are like skeptical and think I'm crazy, like that's fine. Like that's maybe I'm just not for them or this information's not they're not ready to hear it and they may not be and that's okay. Like I don't get really upset over it. I'm just like if you want to study this stuff, if you want to learn more about it, here it is. So yeah, thanks again for
Thank
having me.
you. I mean, I
Right.
appreciate that. The free resources, I have downloaded many of those, and I appreciate you sharing those. And I'm dying to just dive deeper more into this stuff. I appreciate you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.